Today, I want to show you two different immigration stories. The first one surrounds hundreds of thousands of people who have lived in the United States for some years, decades sometimes. These are people that have worked, paid their taxes, often raised American children, built businesses, bought homes, served in our communities, and now many have been informed that their humanitarian protection is ending. The second story is about another group that is being welcomed into the United States through a newly created humanitarian pathway. One group is hearing your protection is ending, and the other is hearing welcome, come on in. So I want to ask a question. What do these two stories tell us about belonging? Immigration is never simply about crossing a border, it's also about membership and identity. It's about who becomes part of us. And that is the question that has shaped American history from the very beginning. So let's take a look at the first one under temporary protected status or TPS. One of the biggest misconceptions today is that TPS recipients are somehow disconnected from American society. As far as our current president making the accusation that they are eating our cats and dogs, they are not. Many have lived here for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. They have built a life, they have children here, American citizens. They work in hospitals, construction, agriculture, warehouses, restaurants, transportation, healthcare. They pay taxes, the same taxes that you and I pay, and they contribute to communities that, in many cases, have become their only home. Currently, there are estimates that roughly state 1.3 million people have received this protection, and roughly about 830,000 currently participate in the American workforce. These are not people living on the margins. They are woven into our society and they keep the system running and contribute to the economy, which raises a question. If someone has spent 20 years here, raised American children, worked, paid taxes, obeyed the law, at what point does temporary become permanent? Now, let's take a look at the history that we have forgotten. In order to understand today's conversation about immigration, identity, and belonging, we need to also understand yesterday's laws. The Immigration Act of 1924 openly favored immigrants from Northern and Western Europe. This was not hidden and it wasn't implied. This was the law. Congress at the time used national origin quotas designed to preserve what many lawmakers at the time believed should remain as America's ethnic composition. In other words, race and national origin were not side issues, they were top of mind. 41 years later, America made a dramatic turn. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 instead focused on family reunification, and it became the cornerstone of immigration. Employment skills became another pathway. The central questions changed, not where are you from, but rather who is your family and what can you contribute? This was one of the most significant shifts in American immigration history. At the same time, asylum gave protection from persecution. Refugees became part of a structured humanitarian system, and temporary protected status, or TPS, developed as a way to respond to sudden instability in specific countries without offering citizenship. But immigration is not only about who arrives, it's also about why people leave their country. And here is another uncomfortable reality about our history. Some of the instability driving migration from Latin America did not emerge in a vacuum, but rather the United States played a role in shaping these regions. In Guatemala, the United States supported the overthrow of a government that wanted to pursue land reform. In other words, to redistribute large amounts of land that was undeveloped but held by rich families and redistribute it to poor people wanting to cultivate it and make a living. In Chile, it worked to undermine the democratically elected government pursuing economic reforms, specifically, an agenda to nationalize natural resources. namely copper, and take it out of the hands of private interests for the purpose of bringing economic prosperity to the nation of Chile, to build roads and schools, hospitals, and all of the things that make a country better. And in Salvador and Nicaragua, Cold War priorities of the 1980s took precedence over social reforms, and our government instead supported dictators looking away at human rights abuses. This, in particular, has led to the instability and poverty in Central America that we see today. And so people flee. And trade agreements such as NAFTA have also taken economic opportunities away from Mexican farmers, where American produce like corn was prioritized as an import over local Mexican farmers, pushing them out of economic prosperity and growth. Now, none of this means that the United States is solely responsible for migration problems, but it has played a significant role that needs acknowledgement. The story is complicated and it requires historical context and understanding of how did we get here. Now, let's imagine immigration as a prism. The facts enter, but depending on the lens, the picture changes. You can look through the racial lens, an economic lens. You can look through a humanitarian lens or constitutional lens, a national security lens, a foreign policy lens. And none of these lenses are completely wrong. Each reveals something different about the conversation, but none of them tell the full story. And the danger begins when one lens becomes the only lens. If I only understand immigration through race, I'll miss economics. If I only understand it through economics, I'll miss humanitarian obligations. And if I only understand it through national security, then I'll miss constitutional principles. Reality is not one dimensional, but unfortunately, our media often is. So now let's look at the second story. Last year, the Trump administration created a refugee pathway for Afrikaners, white individuals from South Africa. Supporters argue that this is a humanitarian response to people facing economic insecurity in South Africa. Critics argue that the effect is to prioritize a population that is overwhelmingly white, if not all white, while ending protections that primarily affect immigrants from Black and Brown countries. Legally, these are two different immigration programs. But politics is more than just legal categories, it's also about symbols and governments. Governments communicate through symbols, not just speeches or press conferences alone, but also with actions. One group is welcomed, another group is being informed that their humanitarian protection has expired. It gets difficult to ignore the contrast.
Welcome. Welcome to the United States of America. It is such an honor for us to receive you here today. This is the land of the free, and we know that all of you have faced. I'm Chris Landau. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm the Deputy Secretary of State of the United States. This is my friend Troy Edgar.
Yeah, I'm the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. And again, welcome. So great to have you guys here.
Go home. Get out. We know our country's better than yours. That's because we filled it with our work ethic and our culture and our values. You being here only dilutes it for us, those who built it and live it. And half of you people, more than half of you, won't assimilate. We don't want you. We don't care if you're offended. Get out. Go home. Go back to fucking hate.
So, who gets to belong? That brings us back to where we started. The question is not only who gets to enter, but also who gets to belong, to become an American, and who decides? And with what values or criteria do we make those decisions? And are we applying those consistently? Immigration policy is more than just border security, it's also about identity. Early in our history, slaves were barred from citizenship. Later, in the 20th century, Asians were barred, and Latin Americans, along with Eastern Europeans, were limited significantly in who could immigrate. American immigration is about American membership, about American identity and belonging. So, who gets to belong? Who receives protection and who does not? Who receives the benefit of the doubt and who is granted refuge? Who must continually prove they deserve to stay? If you have been here 20 years working, contributing, paying taxes with no criminal record, have you proved your worth? Or can your life suddenly be uprooted because you were born in Haiti or in Central or South America and not South Africa? As the United States approaches its 250th anniversary, these questions feel as relevant today as they did a century or two ago. These are not just simple questions, but these are questions that deserve to be looked at through our history. And they deserve that context because when we stop questioning who is included and who is excluded, we lose sight of the values that we want to define us as who we are as a nation. This has been the debrief. And if you enjoyed this conversation and topic, subscribe and share it with someone that you think might find it interesting.
Step inside the construct.